Hi everyone, this is part 2 of the brain model. If you have not watched the first part of the video, please go ahead and do that first. What we have done here is we have opened up the brain and we're looking at the medial portion of the brain. This is a mid-sagittal cut, cutting the brains into left half and the right half, and I am actually holding the right half of the brain, but you're looking at it from the left side, okay? So immediately when you look at the medial section of a brain, you will notice there is a band of white matter that is running from the front all the way to the back. This is called the corpus callosum. It's a bundle of white matter that allows communication between the left and right hemisphere. Right below the corpus callosum at the front here, number 7, this actually leads into the lateral ventricles. Okay? The lateral ventricle is actually much bigger than what you can see here. If you remember from the lecture, if you're able to see through the brain, it's actually almost like a C-shaped horn with a little bit of a projection at the back. And you have the left and right lateral ventricles kind of embedded within each of the brain's hemisphere. Now I can open up this model for you, and you can see right here that the lateral ventricle is forming the C shape that I was telling you about. Now, the lateral ventricle will actually drain into the third ventricle. There is no second ventricle. Okay, left and right lateral ventricles already are 1 and 2, and then it will drain into this region right here, which is the third ventricle. And then from the third ventricle, it will go through the cerebral aqueduct into the fourth ventricle, okay? And then from the fourth ventricle, it will drain further down into the spinal canal, and it will go all the way down to the bottom of your spinal cord. Now, each of these ventricles are going to have their own tissue for producing the cerebral spinal fluid, the CSF. These tissues are called choroid plexus, and they contain special glial cells called ependymal cells, which will help you continuously produce CSF. And as you might recall, CSF are important for creating buoyancy, for example, to allow the brain and the spinal cord to be floating a little bit. They also help distribute nutrients and remove waste product, and so on and so forth. So there you can see the choroid plexus here, and just remember the fourth ventricle would have its own, and the lateral ventricles would have their own as well. So let's go back to the third ventricle a little bit. The third ventricle is referring to the space in front of this structure. This structure is actually one of the two thalami that you have. Thalami is plural, thalamus is singular. Imagine like looking at a box, okay? The empty space in front of the box would be the third ventricle, and then the backboard of the box would be the actual thalamus. And the thalamus is made up of gray matter. Typically, for the brain, you have gray matter on the periphery, okay, the cerebral cortex, and you have white matter, the corpus callosum we talked about. But the thalamus is also gray matter that's found deeper in the brain structure. And the function of the thalamus is to filter sensory information and project them to the appropriate lobe. So if you're looking at something visually, that information is going to go to the thalamus, and then it gets processed and filtered, and then it will go to the occipital lobe, for example. Okay, so all the sensory information will be sorted by the thalamus except for smell. Okay, smell will go directly to the temporal lobe, bypassing the thalamus. Okay. At the back of the thalamus, you have the pineal gland, which is quite small right here, and its function is to produce a melatonin. And as you might know, melatonin is a hormone that helps you go to sleep. If we follow the cerebral aqueduct right here. It will take you once again to the fourth ventricle. And I just want to point out the fourth ventricle. It's kind of like this triangular hollow structure that is between the cerebellum as well as your pons right here. As for the cerebellum, it is gray matter, and it has more neuronal connection compared to the rest of the brain combined. Okay, all these neuronal connections allow us to perform fine motor skills. Okay, if you think about the function of the cerebellum, there are basically three major functions. Number one, it allows you to maintain posture and balance. Number two, it allows you to store motor skills. So motor skills are things that you do with your muscle. Think about typing, think about shooting a basketball, riding a bike. These are very persistent type of memory that you can form in the cerebellum. Even if you haven't ridden a bike for 5-6 years, you will still be able to do it with no problem. Other stuff that you're trying to memorize, like factual things, the names of the brains, for example, those are going to be stored elsewhere in the hippocampus. Okay, and lastly, the third function of the cerebellum is to allow you to execute movements in a smooth, seamless manner. Okay? The pons right here, that is part of your brainstem. Your brainstem has the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. Both the midbrain and the pons are basically serving as bridges to connect different brain parts together. They also have various reflex centers. And if we look at the front right here, just gonna try to hold this thing together. You can see all these things coming out. Those are actually your cranial nerves. And there are a total of 12 pairs of cranial nerves that are responsible for controlling various motor functions as well as receiving sensory information in some cases. Further down the brainstem, we have the medulla oblongata, which is going to exit through the base of the skull and become the spinal cord. And the medulla is important for various autonomic functions, including controlling breathing rate. As you might recall from the first unit in the respiratory system, the medulla oblongata is where you will find the respiratory center. It detects the amount of carbon dioxide in your bloodstream, and it helps regulate your breathing. Other things the medulla oblongata does includes governing various type of reflexes. So coughing reflex, sneezing reflex, swallowing reflex, all these things will happen in the brainstem and the medulla oblongata. Now, another interesting thing about the medulla is when you have various sensory pathway coming up from the spinal cord, 90% of these things will cross the midline at the medulla oblongata. Okay? So that's why, generally speaking, people say the right half of the brain controls the left half of the body and vice versa. And that's because the pathway does cross at the medulla. Okay? Although there are exceptions where you would have the brain receiving information from both sides of the body, but don't worry about those too much at the moment. Let me see if there's anything else here. Right here again, this is the thalamus. And kind of in front of below the thalamus is your hypothalamus, which is known as your master gland, right? We'll learn more about hypothalamus later on in the course, but for now, just know that it regulates the body and try to maintain homeostasis through secretion of various hormones, okay? So if you think back to the third ventricle, once again, the left side and the right side of the third ventricles will be your left and right thalamus, and sort of like the bottom, the floor of the third ventricle is where you will have the hypothalamus. Further down from the hypothalamus, you have this tiny gland here called the pituitary gland, and it works with the hypothalamus to, once again, maintain homeostasis. Let's take a look at here on the side again. If I open up the brain, you will see there's a hidden fifth lobe right here, and that is called the insula. And the insula is responsible for receiving information related to taste. Okay, we call that gustatory information. And you can't really see it until you remove the frontal lobe and you'll be able to see it kind of hiding behind the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe right there. So I think that's all the key structures that we want to go through with this model. Thank you for watching.